This really happened to me, and I'm telling it straight because I want you to feel what I felt. I'm 61. I live in Seattle, and the night this began still rattles like a coin in a dryer at 2 in the morning. My debit card died in my hand. Flatline beeps, red error on the display, while the Safeway on Madison Street thrummed with fluorescent indifference, and a dozen strangers breathed down my neck. It wasn't the chip. It wasn't the reader. It was Dylan, my soft-spoken, smirking partner, who had called my bank and canceled the card without a word to me. The hummed impatience of the line, the sprinkled donuts sweating in their plastic clamshell, the cart's rattling wheel, all of it became the stage where my humiliation set like concrete. The cashier asked if I had another form of payment. Dylan leaned on the end cap of canned tomatoes, pretending to check a text, and said, "Maybe you should keep better track of your accounts, Marta," loud enough for everyone in aisle 5 to hear. People gathered because that's what people do when blood hits water. They tilt their heads. They wait for a body to float up. I felt like mine had. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I pulled my tote bag to my chest like armor and mumbled that there must be a mistake. The receipt printer chattered, not releasing a thing, just chewing. I finally paid with a wrinkled emergency credit card I kept for disasters, small, regular, human disasters like a flat tire. As we pushed the cart out into the chilly March night, Dylan sucked air between his teeth as if disappointed in me, the way a father might scold a child for knocking over a glass. He insisted on taking the keys, and in the car joked about how fraud alerts are such drama lately, as if my catastrophe were a sitcom B-plot. When I reached for my phone to call the bank, he nudged the volume on the radio up a notch and said, "Let's get home first, okay?" He said it like a caretaker. He said it like I couldn't handle things. I was still slow enough and trusting enough to let the engine noise replace the questions lining up to be asked. Home, at the top of Capitol Hill, near Volunteer Park, has old bones and creaks that carry through the night. While I put groceries away, Dylan drifted around my kitchen with the casual entitlement of a landlord, touching pantry labels, tapping the fridge door to check its seal, sliding open drawers as if they were his. For the last 2 years, he had gradually moved from overnight bag to dresser drawer to official residence without ever asking, just the swift tide of convenience. When I finally called Rain City Bank, the customer service rep read the note on my account. A joint account holder had reported the card stolen and requested immediate cancellation. "I don't have a joint account holder," I said. The rep paused. "Ma'am," the person identified himself as Dylan Prescott, listed on the profile as an authorized contact. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ear, like someone knocking. "Put a hold on everything except my mortgage," I said. "Freeze every card connected to my checking account, and please document that I did not authorize any profile changes." My words were careful, because I used to be a court reporter at King County Superior Court, and I know how words wear suits when they need to. When I hung up, Dylan stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. "Had to make sure you were paying attention," he said, smiling as if he'd just hidden an Easter egg in the yard. "You've been scattered." "You canceled my card," I said. "You stole a little power to see if it made you feel big." He shrugged, as if to say, "If the shoe fits." That night, I slept on my side of the bed, the one with the lamp that flickers, unless you jiggle the switch. My oldest friend, Sally, from my book club in Montlake, texted, "You okay? Need me to bring cash in the morning?" I told her I'd be fine. The truth is, I was not fine at all. In the soft midnight of my room, the betrayal wasn't just the card. It was the years I had allowed a younger man's flattery to sand down my edges. Dylan is 42, with careful hair and a wardrobe of tidy flannels that make him look like a man who knows how to split wood and check a soufflé at the same time. He smelled like cedar and cardamom and always knew where he'd left his keys. He liked the word "we" when it meant my money and his plans. And yet I was not ready to admit that he'd plucked the first thread of a larger undoing. I kissed the cracked corner of my phone and whispered the name of my branch manager, like a charm. Her name is Lena Suarez. She runs the Rain City Bank branch on Westlake, and she has a voice that does the thing a good nurse's voice does. Anchors you before the needle goes in. The next morning, I walked into the branch with a folder of statements and 2 years of careful denial. Lena's eyes were alert, even kind, but they didn't sink into any pity. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. She typed. She lifted her chin in those little banker nods that mean, "Keep going." "Unauthorized contact additions are common," she said. "But we time-stamped yours 12 days ago, and the verification came from your home line." Her gaze softened. "Are you sure no one else had access to your phone or your desk, where you keep your bills?" My breath snagged. 12 days. That was when I'd had the flu, when Dylan brought me ginger ale and movies and the mail. He fed me broth by the spoonful and told me I smelled like winter. He sat at my desk to pay a bill on my behalf and joked about earning good boyfriend points. He had probably confirmed the one-time code with one hand, while stroking my hair with the other. "Can you remove him?" I asked. "We can," Lena said. "But I want you to file an incident report internally with us and externally if necessary. Also, I'm flagging your profile for high-sensitivity verification. No changes without in-person ID." She printed a form that felt like a shield. "What I can't do is change the past. We'll start here. And Marta, I'm sorry this happened, but I'm glad you're here today." I left the branch feeling both steadied and exposed, like a tree pulled upright after a windstorm, but still rattling. On the sidewalk, Dylan texted, "How's my CEO doing? Want me to swing by and handle the bank?" The sarcasm was stitched into the quote marks. I didn't answer. I walked to the streetcar stop, watched the sleek car snake down Fairview, and realized the first part of my humiliation wasn't just that my card was canceled. It was that I had let someone treat me like a child who needed correction. I stopped seeing myself and started seeing the word widow that people attach to older women, like a sticker they think will help mail us somewhere safe. That afternoon, I checked my accounts again and saw a $1 verification charge from an online marketplace I didn't recognize. It was the kind of small charge thieves make to test a card before they spend big. I called Lena directly. "Do you see it?" I asked. "Yup," she said, "and I can see it bubbled through from a card on your savings that should never be able to make purchases." A beat. "Marta, did Dylan ever have your online banking password?" I told her no, then yes, then the truth. He once helped me reset it when I forgot, and the new one was a mix of his birthday and my mother's maiden name, because I thought that was cute. Come back, she said. Bring any paperwork you have. Also, do you mind if I observe any future interactions between you two, if they happen here? Sometimes a little daylight changes the weather. I agreed. That night, Dylan brought home takeout from Babar and announced that he'd fixed the card issue by adding himself properly. So now he could unfreeze things in case you get flustered. I asked him to sit down. I told him I would be removing his authorization from everything. He laughed, a short knife sound. Try me, he said. See how fast things get complicated. I slept badly. The house groaned. Rain spattered in the gutters like tiny hoofbeats. In the morning, I drove to the branch with the old debit card in my pocket like evidence. They tell you humiliation fades in the rear view, but it doesn't. It rides shotgun, adjusting the vents and naming every street you pass. I walked in and saw Lena with another client. She lifted 2 fingers. Wait. And I sat. Dylan texted me. We need to talk about the Subaru title. I stared at the message, and for the first time since Safeway, I felt the sharp click of resolve inside me, a tiny metal sound the heart makes when it decides to survive. When I looked up, Dylan was coming through the branch doors in his neat flannel, his jaw set, the tone of a man who expects a crowd to part. He smiled at me like the last bite of a stolen dessert, and loudly enough for Lena to hear, said, Let's straighten out the mess you made. I stood, and the way everyone in the lobby paused made the air taste like rain just before the thunder starts. I didn't know it yet, but the next 5 minutes would change the direction of the entire story. Dylan approached the teller line like he owned it, and for a moment, I saw exactly how he saw himself. The man who knew which forms to fill out, who to charm, where to press for exceptions. The villain who believes the tubes and gears of a bank or a courthouse are impressed by confidence. He slid a driver's license across the counter and announced to the young teller that he was the authorized contact on our account and needed to lift a freeze placed by mistake. He looked over his shoulder to make sure I heard him say, our. The lobby had that bank smell, plastic plants, toner, a hint of carpet cleaner, and the low murmur of other people's private money lives. I caught Lena's eye. She was with an elderly couple, but she angled her body towards me with that subtle protector's pivot. When she finished with them, she walked directly over to us, heels ticking. Good morning, Dylan, she said. Her voice could have been a lullaby if not for the steel blade hidden in its spine. Marta and I have already discussed some profile concerns, so let's step into my office. She opened her palm in a graceful invitation that was not actually a choice. Inside her glass-walled office, Lena took the captain's chair. I sat closest to the door. Dylan chose the corner by the window, where, reflected in the pane, he could keep assessing himself. That's the problem with men like him. They see themselves twice in every room and mistake the extra reflection for proof of importance. Dylan, Lena began, I'm going to confirm some information. For your reference, your name is currently listed only as an authorized contact for phone communication. That is not the same as a joint account holder. She held her eyes on him for the length of one composed breath. Who told you otherwise? He flashed a rehearsed smile. I'm sure Marta did the paperwork. Maybe it was online and she forgot. Ah, Lena said, and wrote something in a neat, small hand on her yellow legal pad. Can you tell me the last 4 digits of Marta's social? He rattled them off without thinking. I felt my stomach drop the way it does on the first downslope of a road you travel every day. Lena, still composed, turned to me. Marta, did you share that information? I did not, I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady, and it came from somewhere behind my ribs, where my mother kept all the sharp things. I watched Dylan, because watching your enemy is how you collect rent on the room they want to take in your head. A tick flickered in his jaw. He was recalculating. Lena tapped a key, and her screen reflected green numbers across her face, like a movie about a heist. She looked up. Okay, she said, bright as a fire alarm. We have a problem. Then, to Dylan, cordial as a neighbor asking for a cup of sugar. I'm freezing Marta's accounts temporarily while we secure them. And now I'm going to need to speak with you about yours. He blinked. Mine? Lena slid a page across the desk. As of 9:16 a.m., our system flagged 3 inbound transfers from accounts under review for identity irregularities. Those transfers hit your Rain City Bank personal checking ending in 0427. Did you know those source accounts belong to 2 other women with mailing addresses that were redirected to a Capitol Hill P.O. box last week? Same box where new debit cards were shipped? He tried to laugh. This is a misunderstanding. Lena's smile sharpened to a single glinting facet. Maybe. So let's understand it. Because while you were standing at my teller line asking to unfreeze Marta's access, compliance alerted me to a quartet of microcharges run through her savings line last night. Something someone with access to her profile might test before attempting an ACH pull this morning. She introduced a pause that felt like the drop before a roller coaster. And since your number is the one added as authorized contact on Marta's profile 12 days ago, and since the verification code that confirmed that change came from Marta's landline, while phone records show your device was connected to her Wi-Fi at that same moment, I'm going to ask you to wait here a moment. She stood, walked out, closed the door gently behind her. The glass wall turned us into a diorama. The older woman and the younger man perched on edges of their chairs, the bank as museum of consequences. Dylan's face went red. You put her up to this, he hissed. You always needed someone to mother you. I let the words fall like pennies off a table. Do you know what you look like right now? I asked softly. You look like someone who just realized the story isn't about him. He rose as if to correct the narrative with his height. He paced once, twice. The second hand on Lena's wall clock clicked. The branch hummed outside our glass bubble. I could feel the branch staff watching without watching. That collective attention people develop in places where rules matter. When the door opened, it was not just Lena. It was Lena and another manager in a slate suit who introduced herself as Amira from compliance, and a security guard with soft eyes who stood near the hall like a period at the end of a sentence. Mr. Prescott, Amira said, we need to speak about the origin of several deposits that look, frankly, like a pipeline from accounts connected to potential elder financial exploitation. There are moments when a person's power drains so quickly you can hear it, like bath water circling the drain. Dylan tried to reroute. You can't talk to me without a lawyer. Amira nodded. Of course. You're free to decline any discussion. We will be closing your checking account for cause under the fraud clause in your account agreement, effective immediately. and placing a hold on outgoing funds while law enforcement is notified. You'll receive formal notice by certified mail. He made a sound like a doorstop being kicked, a bent metal twang. You can't close my account. Lena looked at the clock. We just did. It's 9:21. 5 minutes from when he'd sauntered in to lift the freeze on my life. 5 minutes from humiliation to the start of a reversal. I didn't cheer. It wasn't triumph. Not yet. It was the first hinge swinging in a house of doors. Dylan lunged for the handle. The security guard didn't touch him, just stepped into his oncoming path and said his name once, calm and full. Dylan. It landed like a palm pressed to a wild horse's side. Sir, Amira added, her voice professional sunlight, King County's Financial Crimes Unit has been notified. You're welcome to wait here for them to arrive or to leave now. Either way, your account will be closed for fraud. We'll handle your outstanding checks in accordance with statute. She slid a sheet of paper forward, a letter already printed, a small miracle of preparation. Dylan looked at me, then at the letter, then back to me. I saw him searching for the old tether, the part of me that would rush to smooth things over, to lower my voice, to apologize. When he didn't find it, he turned, pushed out through the door, and into the lobby. The air in the office felt so clean, I could have eaten it with a spoon. I watched him go and became aware of Lena again, her eyes steady on mine. Are you safe at home? She asked, not idly. Because this is where a lot of men get very loud in other rooms. I have locks, I said, and friends. You also have me, she said simply, and the bank, and a paper trail. Let's build it. Outside, the streetcar passed with its low electric whisper, and I had the oldest feeling in the world. That survival is half witness, half will, and you need both if you want to turn a scare into a story you can tell. But the story wasn't finished. The next part required me to learn exactly how far he'd gone. Seattle rain isn't theatrical. It sifts down and stays. Over the next week, I let it be the metronome while I reconstructed my life. You do not know how much air fills your days until you have to inventory it. I listed accounts, trunks of old paperwork, recurring payments, safety deposit keys, the small, shabby corners where life keeps its real records. I called the post office and discovered a change of address request had been filed for my name to a P.O. box near Broadway and Pine. Yes, ma'am, the clerk said. It was filed in person. I asked for the camera footage date. Talk to inspectors, he said, and the old court reporter in me took that as license to dig. Sally drove me to the P.O. box facility. She is a retired librarian and carries the same energy into her retirement. Curiosity on wheels, a good pen, and a purse full of peppermint candies. We stood in the lobby and watched people sort their mail with those small, familiar shrugs human beings make when they see bill envelopes. I thought about all the tiny rivers a life sends out. Subscriptions, notices, old friends finding our address by inference, and how someone who wants to isolate you only has to damn the mail. That afternoon, with Lena's help, I opened a new account, entirely separate, entirely under my name, with two-step verification that required a physical key. We'll drip-feed your checks and direct deposits over to the new one, she said, and smiled when she saw my eyebrows, not at the term. Drip-feeding is what compliance calls it when we slowly move legitimate life over to a safe home while the old house is being fumigated. She tapped her legal pad. I want to show you something. She had built a timeline. 12 days ago, Authorized contact added. 11 days ago, microcharges. 9 days ago, insurance premium login changed, prompting a call to confirm the zip code on file, except the caller had not been me. 7 days ago, a transfer request from my brokerage. Denied because the voice print didn't match. Thank Christ for one good piece of paranoia I'd indulged when the rep offered it last year. And then the Safeway, and then the bank, and then the office, and the closure. This is textbook, Lena said, and the mercy in her voice was that she was talking to me as if I were a peer, not a victim. Isolation, control of funds, mail redirection. They use shame as a crowbar. I went home and made tea and sat at my kitchen table and looked around at my house, like someone touring the museum of their own past. I married young in Spokane, moved west, raised 2 kids who now live in Portland and Austin, buried a husband who loved the Seahawks and old Coltrane records, and then, after 3 stunned years of widowhood, fell into the charm of a man who told me I still had a face like trouble. Dylan had been a personal trainer when I met him at the YMCA, then a wellness consultant, then between opportunities, which is the euphemism for men who will turn your wallet into their job site. My daughter, Nora, flew up that weekend. She didn't say I told you so. She sat on the floor with a stack of statements and a yellow highlighter. What about the Subaru? She asked. Whose name is on the title? Mine, I said. Only mine. Good, she said, and I loved her for the relief that softened her shoulders. What about your will? Also mine, I said, because grief taught me to keep that drawer tidy after her father died. Dylan had never cracked that code, but suddenly I wondered if he had tried. On Monday, I visited the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The detective who met me, a man with tired eyes and cheerful socks, took my report and asked me to tell the story 3 times, once for the facts, twice for the seams. We catch people in seams, he said. Facts can be coached, seams can't. When I got to the Safeway, his pen slowed. Did he gloat in front of others? He asked. Yes. Classic, he said. They like an audience for little cruelties. He gave me a small brochure printed on terrible paper that made the whole thing feel municipal and real. File a fraud alert with the credit bureaus, lock down your credit, and don't forget the utilities. You'd be amazed how often abusers leave the gas in their name so they can turn it off from a bar stool. I saw Dylan everywhere after that. In the man at the coffee bar who cut the line. In the tech bro talking too loudly into his headset. In the neighbor who put his recycling in my bin because it was closer. It's like this. When you finally look at a bruise under good light, you see where it blooms under the skin and how it maps veins you didn't know you had. The call came 2 days later. This is Detective Raines, the voice said. We obtained surveillance footage from the post office. The person who filed the change of address looks a lot like Mr. Prescott. We also have bank footage of him attempting to deposit a check made out to you into his account with a forged signature. Rain City flagged it and froze the funds. We're seeking a warrant. I felt the room tilt into clarity. What happens next? I asked. That depends on how clever you want to be, he said. We can go pick him up. Or, if you're willing to help us, we can invite him to walk into a trap. I am an older woman. People underestimate us because they think our patience is elderly, when in fact it is tactical. I said, tell me what you need. We met at the bank after hours. Lena was there, along with Amira and Detective Raines, and a young ADA with a legal pad and a jaw like a second opinion. We want to engineer a situation where he tries to move money he believes is available, the ADA explained. We'll dangle it, then we'll document the attempt. The fraud hold gives us leverage. His reaction gives us proof of intent. How do we dangle? I asked. By letting him taste access, Lena said grimly. And by using a debit card he thinks is live. I held up the cracked old card from Safeway and smiled without humor. I've got the perfect prop. That night, I texted Dylan. We need to talk about the money. I'm willing to make it easy if we keep lawyers out of it. He called instantly. Finally, he said, and I could hear the grin. Meet me tomorrow at 10. The bank. Bring your checkbook. Don't make this messy. I won't, I said. And Dylan, bring your ID. He laughed. Always do. I slept with the lamp on. Courage glowed in circles around the night moths that tried to batter their way in. In the morning, I wore my husband's old Seahawks cap and a plain jacket and a pair of boots that made me stand the height of a woman who knows her center of gravity. Sally called and offered to wait at a coffee shop across the street. If he looks at you wrong, she said, I will come in with the fury of all librarians and shush him into dust. I might need that, I said, and we both smiled at the loveliness of an old friend's threat. When I walked into the bank at 9:58, Lena met my eyes and gave a tiny nod. Go. Dylan arrived at 10:03, already irritated at the universe. He slid into the chair in the glass office like a man about to take possession of something that ought to have been his all along. What's your plan? He asked, tilting his head the way men do when they believe their jawline is their strongest argument. My plan, I said, and laid the cracked debit card on the desk, is to let you undo the mess you made. Good, he said, reaching for the card. Give me that. I placed my hand over it. With conditions, I said. You wire back the 2 loans you pulled from my savings. You return the title to my house key, and you pack your things by Friday. This is adorable, he said, and reached again. You still think you have leverage. I let him take the card. I let him stand. I let him walk out to the ATM, and I let him slide it into the slot the way a man slides a sticky lie into a sentence, hoping it glides as easily as a truth. He tried the pin he knew, because, of course, he knew it. And when the prompt asked for a selection, he picked transfer funds and lifted his chin like an actor hitting his favorite line. The screen blinked. He smiled. And then the machine flashed. Account access restricted. Contact branch manager. Dylan's neck flushed. He hit buttons the way a man hits surfaces that don't behave. He turned toward the teller line with a half-friendly, half-commanding wave. I need a manager, he said loudly. This machine is broken. Lena appeared like a calm weather front. It's not broken, she said. Come back into the office, please. He stalked in. You're all ridiculous, he said. Marta wants to resolve this without lawyers. Let me move what's mine. I do want to resolve this without lawyers, I said. I looked at him the way they taught us in court reporting to look at. Witnesses who think they can hustle a transcript. Pleasant, steady, unmovable. But this has never been yours. Amira entered behind him. Detective Raines stood near the hallway, not hiding. Mr. Prescott, Amira said, that attempt satisfied the element we needed. On the record, you attempted to access funds from a restricted account via an instrument you knew had been canceled. Per your account agreement, we're terminating your relationship with Rain City Bank permanently. Effective now. He laughed that same knife sound, but it glanced off the walls. You can't ban me from a bank. We can, Lena said. We did. He swung to me. You'll regret this. No, I said. I will remember it. That's different. Outside, the January light had the color of a pill bottle. Inside, the air tasted like relief brewing tea. He left before the detective could ask him to stay. Sometimes the smart thing wolves do when faced with a larger pack is run and hope snow covers their tracks. I watched the glass door close on the reflection of a man who had wanted everything and wound up with less than his own name. And yet, the next days jolted with escalation. The war part of the story had begun. Revenge isn't a single strike. It is campaign strategy. It is maps and supply lines and knowing where a man keeps his water. I filed a civil protection order at the King County Courthouse, where the smell of paper and old coffee and consequence always fills the hallways. While I waited for the clerk, I watched a young couple argue about a custody schedule, with a harshness that made me ache for them. Pain makes fools of us all if we let it keep its hand on our faces too long. The order hearing was scheduled for Friday. In the meantime, Detective Raines confirmed what we suspected. Dylan had siphoned small amounts from 2 other women he had dated, moving their money into his account, under the guise of joint budget experiments. He was charming in the way that makes people think they can be careless around him. He was also sloppy. We think he pulled this before, Raines said, but with less access. He got brave with you because he thought your grief made you slow. It had, for a while. But my slowness had turned into a kind of deliberate that felt like power. I gathered texts and emails. I found a message he sent to a friend calling me Bank Mom. I printed it on paper so that when anyone asked me why I was doing this, I could hold up the words that had lived in private and let daylight change their weather. Sally sat at my kitchen table with her peppermint candies and a stapler, and we made a case like we were building a quilt. Pattern, story, proof. When Friday came, the judge peered at us over her reading glasses. Dylan wore a navy blazer and a frown that suggested this had all inconvenienced him. I wore the steady clothes of a woman who knows paper beats pretense. When the judge asked if there had been attempts to access funds, I told the Safeway story and the bank office and the ATM. When she asked if I felt afraid, I looked at the line of people waiting behind us and thought of how fear often is the thing that keeps women nicely in line. I feel wary, I said, and angry, which is to say, alert. She granted a temporary order. The sheriff's deputy handed Dylan the papers. He sneered and said to me, "You think you won." The deputy cleared his throat gently. "Sir," he said, "you can direct your comments to the court." Men like Dylan hate being told where to put their words. By then, Rain City had closed his account and filed their own reports. The ADA moved swiftly. A warrant was issued for financial exploitation, identity theft, forgery. Dylan's lawyer did that oily thing where they say their client is working through a misunderstanding. The ADA, a woman barely older than my daughter, and with a spine like a lighthouse beam, replied, "The misunderstanding appears to be about what belongs to him." I wanted to knit her a sweater. The day the police picked him up, he texted me one last time. "This is an overreaction. Call it off." The audacity of the request made me laugh out loud in my kitchen. I thought of the Safeway aisle, the beeping register, the donuts sweating in their plastic. I thought of the night his hand stroked my hair, while his other hand turned my profile into a lever. No, I said aloud, to the empty room, to myself, to whatever ghost of him still thought my heart was a doormat I'd lay out fresh every day. No, you get quiet victories too. The insurance company restored my login and flagged my file. The post office rescinded the change and apologized. My mail came home like a flock of birds after a storm. I stood by my box and ran my hand over the envelopes, the weight of community and commerce and identity in paper form. At the bottom of the pile was a letter from Rain City addressed to me and to Dylan, 2 separate letters in one envelope, as if to acknowledge that some stories produce twins before they sever. Marta, it read, we have concluded our review. Fraud losses prevented, 23,147. Additional attempts blocked. Profile restored. Please accept our apology for the distress and our thanks for your vigilance. Dylan, it read, your account has been closed for fraud under Section 13.2 of your agreement. Law enforcement notified. Do not return to any Rain City branch without prior written authorization. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. That's the trap compassion sets for the people who use it like a rope ladder. Even as they climb away with your little kindnesses stuffed in their pockets, you lean out the window, thinking maybe you could still catch them if they fall. Then I remembered the Safeway, and I shut the window. The criminal case moved like winter sky, slow, gray, eventually decisive. At the arraignment, he pled not guilty and learned the exact weight of the state's paperwork. At the pretrial conference, he watched the ADA pile exhibits like bricks. He returned to his apartment in Lower Queen Anne, a place good at hiding men in plain sight, and found, I hope, that there is an emptiness particular to people who discover their last trick stopped working. But revenge isn't really about punishment. It's about equilibrium. It's about setting a thing back in its rightful place. And the final piece, the one I designed for myself, arrived on a sunny afternoon when the plum trees on my block had exploded into confetti. I printed copies of a letter and sealed them in envelopes. One went to the YMCA, one to the boutique gym where he'd been pestering managers for a part-time coaching opportunity, one to an HOA board where he'd pitched himself as a consultant to optimize budgets. Each letter said the same thing in bureaucratic plainness. I had been in a relationship with Mr. Prescott. He attempted to access my accounts without permission. Rain City Bank closed his account for fraud. A criminal case was pending. I provided the cause number. I provided the ADA's contact. The woman who had once kept her pain tidy now wrote her truth like a utility bill. A week later, Sally and I were at Oddfellows Cafe when we saw Dylan cross the street like a man measuring sidewalk squares in a contest he had not signed up for. He saw us. He stopped. He looked like a person who once lived inside a high, loose idea about himself and had been evicted. He didn't come in. He didn't need to. I had the chili, and the air tasted like tomatoes and relief. The day of sentencing, the judge read the charges and the recommendation. He would serve a year in county, then probation. He would pay restitution. He would attend a program that made men sit in rooms where other men tell stories they don't want to hear about harm and the cost of it. He would not contact me again. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I said yes. This was not about a card, I said. This was about trying to make me smaller because it made him feel larger. I used to be a court reporter. I know the transcript of days better than most. My record shows a man who used charm as a crowbar, and then was surprised when the door he pried open had an alarm. I am an older woman. We are not foolish. We are patient. That's all, Your Honor. Outside the courthouse, the day had that empty elevator quality that Seattle days get when the sky decides to go somewhere else for a while. I stood on 3rd Avenue and breathed. Lena called me later. "How are you?" she asked. "Hungry," I said, and she laughed the way you laugh when storms finally choose someone else to follow. "Come by the branch," she said. "I have something for you." It was the old cracked debit card, laminated. On the back, she'd written in Sharpie, "You did this. Remember." I slid it into my wallet like a badge. I drove home past the Safeway, and then past the bank, and then up the hill to where my house waits in the trees, and the windows catch the light. On my porch, the mail sat tidy and whole. Inside, the kettle whispered. On the table, a stack of papers held proof that a life can be disassembled and then put back together without losing the shape of the woman who lives it. And every now and then, after I tell this story, someone will ask me what revenge tasted like. I tell them it tasted like tea with honey on a day when the rain decides to rest. And the last sip was the sweetest, not because it punished a man, but because it freed a woman, which is all any of us ever wanted. Months later, I was back at Safeway, because that's where life insists you return, to the ordinary places where you were once embarrassed. The bakery case was full of donuts, glossier than I remembered. I stood in a normal line on a normal Tuesday, and the card reader hummed its normal hum. My laminated reminder sat at home, but my memory did the job. When I swiped my new card, the receipt printed as if no one had ever tried to make me small. I thanked the cashier by name, Jenny, and she smiled with the relief of people who are glad when machines behave. On my way out, I saw a man at the service counter arguing about a gift card that wouldn't activate. He was young and loud and a little scared, and I watched the manager narrow her eyes, balancing suspicion with compassion, trying to decide what kind of story she was in. I cannot fix everyone's plot, but I can tell mine. I can stretch the ribbon of it across the distance between humiliation and recovery until the shape looks like a bridge. On the sidewalk, the March wind feathered my hair. I checked my phone. A friend had texted me a photo of the plum trees. They were ballooning again, no matter what we had done or what had been done to us. That's the thing I keep now, in the cabinet where I once kept my worry. This certainty that life's bloom belongs to me as surely as it belongs to the rest of the city. Back home, I made tea. The house exhaled. I opened the window and let the air affirm everything the past year had taught me. That humiliation can be a hinge, that resolve can be a door, that banks can be battlefields where the right ally is a general, and that 5 minutes, is sometimes all it takes to turn a story in the direction you were always meant to be walking. I slid the laminated card into the book I was reading as a bookmark and smiled at the accident of it. The very object that once shrieked my helplessness now marked the place where I would return to myself. And when I finally turned out the lamp, the room went quiet in that good way. The kind that makes you hear your own name as if someone you love is saying it from down the hall. The end.